Donald Trump was apparently more jealous of Rodrigo Duterte than we had originally thought, and that he led on, because according to a new book by the Wall Street Journal reporter Michael Bender, Trump wanted more violence against BLM demonstrators. And for anyone paying attention to last summer's mass movement, you wonder, how is that possible to have more violence against BLM demonstrators? Well, I guess the former president thought it was. So, according to CNN, the president would highlight videos that showed law enforcement getting physical with protesters and telling his administration he wanted to see more of that behavior. The excerpts show, quote, "That's how you're supposed to handle these people," Trump told his top law enforcement and military officials. According to Bender, he also said, quote, "Crack their skulls." Trump also told his team that he wanted the military to go in and beat the F out of civil rights protesters. And then on one occasion, quote, "Just shoot them," Trump said. Apparently, actually, multiple occasions he said that, according to excerpts, when Milley, who is this military general, and then Attorney General William Barr would push back, Trump toned it down, but only slightly. Is any of this surprising to you all, Jackson, as well? Here we have more violence was desired.
Absolutely not. I think that this really highlights how unserious and unfocused the right wing in America has been, and how it has increased over the decades, especially in my lifetime, my 29 years of life. Pretty much as soon as I came on the planet, Bill Clinton was in office, and things just went ever rightward from there. And this really affects policy. This affects what types of laws get passed, and this affects really just the overall instability of the nation as a whole. You have people, actually I was, one of the polls came out about the top Republican priorities. Immigration laws are way up there, election sanctity is up there, and things like healthcare are way at the bottom. Things like infrastructure are way down at the bottom. And these social and cultural issues keep going way up to the top, where you have our crumbling infrastructure, you have our healthcare system and education system being an international joke. You have all of these things, all these problems in our wage system, our financial system, and yet, ban critical race theory is the biggest thing that the Republicans really have to bring to the table right now. And so Donald Trump calling for more and more violence is not surprising that this is their guy, even though he's a proven fraud many times over, it doesn't matter. So this isn't surprising, and I think we're gonna see a lot more of it moving forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think Donald Trump's contempt for non-whites is pretty well documented at this point. So the idea that we would be surprised by any anti-black sentiment, specifically from people who are, sort of protesting peacefully for better treatment of black people, that's red meat for Donald Trump to devour and basically make a show of it for his base, right? And even in private, it doesn't matter if it's in private or public. This is how Donald Trump feels. And as a New Yorker, Donald Trump is of that. Like that's NYPD tactics. That's how they get down. If there's a crowd of black people gathering anywhere in New York City, best believe NYPD is ready to crack some skulls. That's just the culture of where Donald Trump comes from.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mentioned Duterte in the top of the show, of the top of the segment, and it's really not that far off. Look, I talked about with John Iadarola earlier this morning on the damage report, the death, the execution, the extrajudicial execution of Michael Reinhold, who was accused of having murdered a Patriot Prayer member. You guys remember in Portland, right? And this is not, he wasn't a police officer, he wasn't a US Marshal, but he was gunned down by US Marshals, by Donald Trump's administration. No questions asked, no warning given, according to most of the witnesses. So it's just, again, that's how he wants BLM demonstrators, sympathizers. Michael was white, so it doesn't really matter. It's the politics specifically of it. That's what he wants, and he celebrated that, right? That's what was celebrated. So for me, this is like, look, if these fascists get another crack at the White House, they're bringing this back tenfold. They are learning from their mistakes. And in their mind, the mistake wasn't, oh, we gotta be more like Liz Cheney. The mistake was, no, we weren't fascist enough, Right. They were like, we've got this whole like insurrection act that we didn't call forth. Why don't we do that? Why don't we just have a state of emergency forever? Then you can't change, presidencies. So I guess the one piece of this is interesting, which is we've got this general, right? This General Milley, he's gone viral now, of course, because of his statements around critical race theory and actually wanting to talk about white rage. And he's in the room, US military going, nah. And that's how you know something was crazy, when like the US military is like, we probably shouldn't do that, because they're usually down for a lot of violations of civil rights, generally.
Speaking of, you mentioned executions. Wasn't on One American News Network, some guy was calling for executing people. I can't remember exactly what it was. I mean, it's One American News Network, something ridiculous. But basically, who challengers of Donald Trump in some form or fashion, he was calling for their execution. And like you mentioned, if these fascists get another crack at the White House, they will. And the biggest reason they will is because the Democratic Party has liquid molten capitulation running through their veins, and they're completely, I kind of move more and more like Anna. The more this show goes on, it just, my general pessimism. I think that there's always opportunities to make things better, to organize in the streets. The good thing is more and more people, our generation specifically and youngers, are getting more and more politically active. However, the levers of power still are not in our hands. And so moving into the 2022 midterms after all the redistricting and just the general lack of accomplishments that the Biden administration has done, unfortunately the Republican Party is a challenge. So yeah.
And I think even somebody like me has been guilty of this in the past, of sort of taking Donald Trump's general buffoonery and oafish nature and saying, well, that's a sideshow, it's a distraction, you can't take him seriously. But the problem with that is that these very callous sentiments that he has towards certain groups are exactly the animating forces of his support. And I think the people in and around the GOP understand that. So if they're like, yo, this is what gets the people going, gets the people excited, they are incentivized to behave this way, right? Like, I don't think this gets out in public and people who support Donald Trump are like, heavens, no, not the blacks. Don't beat the blacks' heads in. No, they're like, yeah, that's exactly what they should have been doing, right? And so that's what I think is the real danger in this, in that, just the general, inhumane feelings that Trump has for other groups of people is what gets people excited about him.
Absolutely.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
I like to think that it's a small number of people, but that those small number of people are incredibly bloodthirsty. I don't know if that makes me feel a little better, but I feel like it does. I'm just like, well, it's not a lot of people who want blood, but those who do are armed and scary and very racist. Anyway, one part of this, and they vote, exactly.
And they vote.
One part of the story you guys have to know about, and I want everyone watching to know about it, is that General Milley, right? Also, in these private meetings where Trump wanted more skulls cracked, is said to have told Stephen Miller. This is after Miller was like, "Oh, look at Portland and look at Minneapolis. These are third world." He said something like this: "Third world countries." Milley told Stephen Miller to shut the f up, right to his face, and. I don't know Milley's entire career trajectory, but I feel like in my book, that was the crowning jewel of it. Telling Stephen Miller to shut the F up is like, mwah, brilliant. I wanna do that every single day. And I'm glad that at least someone was telling him and putting him in his place. In his like, go back to your blanket fort, go play with the wall that you built out of Legos. You know what I mean? Along the Rio Grande. Anywho.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.